Hello there, welcome to HFY Quantum Pro. Here, helping one another makes the universe smarter. So, what we are waiting for? Let's begin our story.
The intake form said Block 7. Darren Holt read it twice, folded it, and put it in his front pocket. Around him, the arrival hall of Station Kelvith was loud with the sounds of 100 different species settling in for the new Academy cycle. Bags were dropped. Names were called. A tall Drathian cadet near the far wall laughed at something, and the sound rattled the ceiling panels. Everywhere Darren looked, there were creatures bigger, heavier, and more visibly dangerous than him. Nobody looked at him twice. That was fine. He found his assigned dormitory room, set his bag down on the narrow cot, and opened his welcome packet. Most of it was standard schedule, conduct rules, mess hall timings. He skimmed it until he reached the training block assignments, Block 7, Vorkai Endurance Program, that he did not know what that meant. So he looked it up on the station's public information terminal near the dormitory entrance. The entry was short. The Vorkai was a war creature, it said, bonded historically to elite Sorith warriors, housed at the Academy for advanced endurance training. Cadets were expected to enter the pen and hold their ground. There was a small note at the bottom of the entry, almost like an afterthought. 14 cadets sent to medical this cycle. Approach with full awareness. Darren read it, nodded slowly, and went to find the mess hall. He was eating alone when a small cadet sat across from him without asking. She was Velhuri, insectoid, for thin arms, large compound eyes that caught the light like oil on water. She introduced herself as Cinna and immediately told him she had seen his assignment on the shared block roster. "You are in the Vorkai pen," she said. "Yes," Darren said. "You should request a change." "Why?" Cinna set down her utensils and looked at him with all four arms folded. "Because in this academy's entire history, no cadet has ever successfully completed the Vorkai endurance drill. The highest time recorded is 41 seconds. The creature has broken bones. It has put cadets through walls. 3 years ago, it crushed a Drathian's shoulder plate clean through." Darren chewed his food. "How old is it?" Cinna paused. "What? The Vorkai. How old is it?" She blinked her compound eyes slowly. "The records say approximately 200 years. It bonded once with a Sorith commander who died in the Fourth Border War. It has not bonded since. Does it eat well?" Cinna stared at him for a long moment. "That is not a normal question." "Probably not," Darren agreed. "What does it eat?" She told him. He listened carefully. Then he asked about its sleep schedule, its movement patterns, whether it had any injuries on record. Cinna answered everything because she found she could not stop. There was something about the way he asked that made the questions feel important, though she could not say why. A large shadow fell across the table. Darren looked up. The Drathian from the arrival hall stood over them, broad-shouldered, with a long pale scar running down his left forearm. He looked at Darren the way someone looks at a wrong turn on a map. "You are the human in Block 7, the Drathian said. "Darren Holt, Oru." He pulled up his sleeve and showed the scar without being asked. "The beast did that 8 months ago. My first session. I lasted 22 seconds." He said it without embarrassment, as a simple fact. "I've gone back twice since. My record is 31 seconds. You should put in for a reassignment while the cycle is still open." "I appreciate the advice," Darren said. Aura waited. Darren did not say anything else. Aura made a short sound that might have been a grunt or might have been a laugh and walked away. Cinna watched him go. "He's not wrong." "I know," Darren said. That evening, Darren did not study tactics or run the physical conditioning drills most new cadets were doing in the training yard. Instead, he found the outer wall of Block 7 and sat down against it on the floor of the access corridor. The wall was thick alloy, cold, and faintly vibrating from whatever moved behind it. He sat there and listened. After a while, he could separate the sounds. The low structural hum of the station, the distant noise of the training yard, and underneath those, something else. Slow, heavy breathing, irregular footsteps, not pacing, just moving. Occasionally a sound like armor plates shifting against each other. The beast was awake. Darren stayed for 2 hours. He did not try to make noise or signal his presence. He just sat there, back against the wall, until he had memorized the rhythm of the breathing on the other side. Cinna found him there near the end of the second hour. She stood in the corridor entrance and looked at him with her head tilted at an angle that, for Velhari, meant genuine confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Getting used to it," Darren said. "And letting it get used to me." Cinna looked at the blank wall. She looked at him. She opened her mouth, closed it, and sat down beside him without another word. Through the wall, the slow breathing continued. Tomorrow his first session was scheduled for 0700. Block 7. The Vorkai pen. He had not put in for a reassignment, that he had no plan to. The pen smelled like iron and old stone. That was the first thing Darren noticed when he stepped onto the observation deck above Block 7. Not the size of the space, not the reinforced walls, not even the other cadets around him pressing forward to get a look at the floor below. Just the smell. Heavy and real, like something that had been alive in this room for a very long time. Commander Rel stood at the deck railing, arms clasped behind his back, scales dark and smooth in the overhead light. He was Sorith, old, built like a statue made of muscle, with the patient stillness of a creature that had never needed to hurry. He did not look at the cadets beside him. He looked only at the floor below. Down there, the Vorkai was already awake. The IT was larger than anything Darren had expected. He had read the records. He had looked at the size estimates. It had not prepared him. The creature moved along the far wall of the pen with a slow, rolling gait, each of its 6 legs finding the ground with deliberate weight. Its armored hide caught the light in pale ridges. The bioluminescent markings along its flanks burned a steady, deep red. A senior cadet named Breck, tall, Drathian, broad enough to block the light, stepped down the access stairs to the pen floor. The doors sealed behind him. From the observation deck, he looked suddenly small. Rel said nothing. He simply watched. Breck took his stance in the center of the pen. Combat posture, weight forward, hands out. The beast turned from the wall and looked at him. It did not move for 3 full seconds. Then it came. Not a full charge, a short, explosive burst, the kind meant to test. Breck held for 4 seconds before his feet moved. He caught himself, reset, tried to hold again. The beast circled. Breck tracked it, turning, keeping his front forward. 20 seconds. 30. At 34 seconds, the beast dropped its shoulder and drove forward, and Breck went sideways into the padded wall hard enough to bounce. He was up in 2 seconds, unhurt, but the drill was done. The next cadet lasted 20 seconds. The third lasted 38, which caused a murmur on the observation deck, apparently a record for this cycle, before the beast clipped her with 1 foreleg and she sat down hard on the floor. She raised her hand to show she was uninjured. The doors opened and she walked out. Darren watched all of it. He did not watch Breck. He did not watch the other cadets. He watched the beast. He watched the way it moved before a charge. The slight dip of the left foreleg, the pause in the bioluminescent pattern half a second before it accelerated. He watched the way it circled, always counter direction, always angling for the cadet's weak side. He watched what it did after each charge. Stop, turn, assess that IT was not wild. It was not random. It was reading every cadet in that pen and responding to exactly what it found there. Cinna appeared at his elbow. She had her data pad out and was recording the session numbers in a neat column. "You're scheduled for tomorrow's first slot," she said quietly. "I know. Did you watch the charges? The left foreleg drops first. If you know what to look for, I saw it." Brett trained for 6 months before his first session. The Drathian conditioning program for Vorkai endurance is considered advanced even by coalition standards. "I know." Cinna looked at him sideways. "You have been here 2 days." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Below, the pen was being reset for the next training group. The beast had returned to the far wall, its markings cycling slowly back toward a lower red. Calmer, but not calm. "What are you thinking about?" Cinna asked. Darren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Back on Earth, my family kept large animals. Draft horses. Big. Heavier than most things in that pen. When one of them got frightened, there was a wrong way to handle it and a right way." "What was the wrong way?" "Show them you were afraid of being afraid. They could feel that. It made everything worse." Cinna processed this. "And the right way? Just be there. Not pushing, not running. Just present. Below them, the beast settled against the wall. In the dim light, its markings pulsed like something breathing underwater. Cinna looked at her notes, then at the pen, then at Darren. She said, "The Vorkai is not a horse." "No," Darren agreed, "but it is something that has been alone for a very long time. And I think that matters." Cinna did not write that down, but she thought about it for the rest of the evening. That night, Darren returned to the outer wall of Block 7. He sat in the same spot as before. He stayed for 1 hour. The breathing on the other side of the wall had changed its rhythm slightly, slower, lower. He did not know if that meant anything, that he sat there until it felt like the silence was shared rather than empty. Then he went to bed. His first session was in 9 hours. The pen doors opened at exactly 0700 and Darren walked in. The sound of the lock engaging behind him was very loud in the silence. He did not look back at it. The beast was already watching him from the far end of the pen. Its bioluminescent markings burned red in the low light. And even from 30 meters away, Darren could feel the weight of its attention, like something physical pressing against his chest. It was bigger at floor level than from the observation deck. The ridges of its armored back were nearly as tall as his head. Each breath it took moved its whole rib cage. On the deck above, the observation space was more crowded than usual. Word had gotten around. Cinna had taken a spot near the left railing, her data pad in all 4 hands. Oru stood near the back, arms crossed, saying nothing. 6 or 7 other cadets stood along the rail. Commander Rel was in the command post, watching through the reinforced window with his full attention, and 01 on that deck made a sound. Darren walked to the center of the pen and stopped. He did not take a combat stance. He let his hands fall loose at his sides. His weight was balanced, not braced, the posture of someone who is ready to move, but not expecting a fight. The beast did not move for 7 seconds. Its markings pulsed. Its head turned slightly, angling one eye directly at him, then the other, reading. Then it charged, short and explosive, the same test burst it used on every cadet. The left foreleg dipped first. Darren saw it the moment it happened. And he stepped to the right, smooth and unhurried, just enough to let the rush go past his shoulder. Not a dodge, not a combat roll. The way someone steps around a large dog coming through a gate too fast that he exhaled, the beast stopped. It was 2 meters past him, and it turned its head back to look. This close, the armored skull was the size of a barrel. The bioluminescent markings were still red, but at the very edges, just at the borders of each marking, something was changing. A faint thread of amber on the deck. Cinna's 4 hands tightened around her data pad. Rel leaned forward in his chair. The beast turned its body to face Darren again. Slower this time. It walked toward him, not charging, just walking, closing the distance until it stopped with its head at arm's length. Darren could feel the warmth coming off of it. He could hear the layered sound of its breathing, deeper than he expected, almost rhythmic. He did not move. He did not look away. He did not stare down either. There was no challenge in his expression, no aggression, no performance. He simply looked at it the way you look at something you are genuinely trying to understand. The beast held that position for a long moment. Then it began to circle, slow circles, closer than it had circled any other cadet. Darren turned with it, keeping it in front of him, matching its pace without rushing. The red in its markings was fading. Not all of it, but steadily the amber was spreading. At the 40-second mark, Oru on the observation deck uncrossed his arms. At T50 seconds, Rel pulled up the historical records on his terminal and began searching for the last time amber markings had been documented. The buzzer sounded at 60 seconds. Darren walked to the exit doors. At the threshold, he stopped and glanced back once. Not to prove anything, just to look. The beast had not moved. It stood exactly where it was when the buzzer sounded, watching the door. Its markings were amber from edge to edge. The doors opened and Darren stepped through it on the deck. The silence held for 3 full seconds after he disappeared from view. Then Oru said, "What just happened?" And the whole deck seemed to breathe again at once. Cinna was already scrolling through the color records on her data pad, cross-referencing the amber documentation. She found one entry. 43 years ago. The context field was almost empty, just 3 words. Possible recognition behavior. She underlined it twice. I in the command post. Rel sat very still for a long moment. Then he opened a new file on his terminal and began typing a formal observation note. He wrote carefully, weighing each word. When he reached the section where he was supposed to classify what had occurred, he stopped. He did not have a classification for it. He left that field blank and kept writing that I in the access corridor outside the pen. Darren sat down against the wall, the same wall he had been sitting against for 2 nights. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was slower than it had been inside, that he had been frightened in there. He knew that. He just hadn't let it become the biggest thing in the room. After a moment, he heard it, through the wall, unmistakable. The Vorkai, settling, slow and heavy, the sound of something very large lying down. Darren leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. By the next morning, everyone on Station Kelvith had heard about the human in Block 7, that the story moved the way all good stories move in closed spaces. Fast, changing slightly with each telling. The Drathian cadets, said Darren, must have used some kind of combat suppression technique, something humans had developed in their long history of warfare. The Velhari scholars in the research wing started pulling data on human stress response patterns. 2 of the Sorth instructors had a private argument in the equipment corridor about whether what happened qualified as a training incident or something else entirely. Administrator Foss filed another reassignment request for Cadet Holt, Block 7, to a standard endurance program. He was very sure it was the right thing to do. The form went to Commander Rel's office. Rel rejected it without comment. Then he called Darren in. The meeting was short. Rel sat behind his desk and looked at Darren away. He looked at everything. Steady, assessing, giving nothing away. He asked Darren to describe what he had done in the pen. Step by step. Starting from when the doors opened, Darren described it plainly. He said he walked to the center. He said the beast charged. He said he stepped to the side. Rel waited for more. Darren said that was most of it. Rel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, every cadet who has entered that pen was trained to hold their ground or to respond to the charge. You did neither. What were you thinking when it came at you? Darren thought about it. He said, I wasn't thinking about the charge. I was thinking about what it needed from me. What does that mean? It needed to know I wasn't a threat, and it needed to know I wasn't afraid of it. Those are 2 different things. Rel looked at him for a long time. He said, you were afraid. Yes, Darren said, but I wasn't afraid of it. I was afraid of doing the wrong thing. Rel wrote something in his notes. He did not share what it was. He dismissed Darren and sat at his desk for a few minutes after, reading over what he had written, not entirely sure it was enough. The second session happened the next day. The deck was even more crowded than before. Darren walked into the pen the same way he had walked in the first time. Steady, no posturing. The beast was already turned toward the entrance when the doors opened, as if it had been waiting that IT crossed the pen in half the time it usually took. Not a charge, a walk, direct and purposeful, closing the distance in long strides until it stopped directly in front of him. It sniffed him, slowly, thoroughly, the broad head moving along his shoulder, his arm, the side of his neck. The markings were already at amber. They had gone to amber before the beast even reached him. Then it lowered its head. Not fully, not the full bow that would come later, but the massive skull dropped, angling down so that the top of its armored head was level with Darren's shoulder. It held that position in the command post. Rel's chair made a sharp sound against the floor. He was already searching records before he had fully processed what he was seeing. The last documented head lower was 41 years ago. It had been classified under a category called proximity acceptance. But the old Sorth notes beside it said something different. They said, it is choosing. Oru found Darren in the corridor outside the mess hall that afternoon. He did not greet him or wait for a good moment. He just walked up and said, how did you kill the fear? Darren looked at him. I didn't. Oru frowned. You stood in front of it and did not move. That is, I was afraid the whole time, Darren said. I'm afraid now, thinking about going back in tomorrow. But fear isn't the problem. The problem is when you treat fear like a wall instead of just a feeling. Oru was quiet. He looked at his scarred forearm. He said, very quietly, my first session, I was thinking about winning. I know, Darren said. I could see it from the deck. The beast could probably feel it. Aura did not say anything else. He walked away slowly, and for the first time since Darren had arrived, the big Drathian looked like he was actually thinking rather than just processing. Cinna had been taking notes every day. Her file was now 11 pages. She had titled it something dry and clinical, cross-species behavioral variance, hold subject, but the last entry she had written was not clinical at all. It said simply, "He is not doing anything that can be taught in a classroom. I'm not sure it can be taught at all. I think it is something they grew into over a very long time without knowing it was happening." She stared at that sentence for a while. Then she saved the file and closed her data pd.I in the pen below. The Vorkai's markings glowed amber in the empty room. It had not returned to red since the second session ended, and no one had noticed yet. But Rel noticed everything. He wrote it down. It was a Tuesday when the containment grid failed, which was the kind of detail that only matters because it was a completely ordinary day right up until it wasn't. The power fault was in section grid 4, a magnetic alignment failure in the older part of the station's infrastructure, the kind of thing the maintenance logs had flagged 3 times in 2 years and never fully fixed. It lasted 91 seconds. During those 91 seconds, 18 doors on the station defaulted to their open position. One of them was the outer gate of Block 7. Darren was in the corridor 2 sections away, on his way back from the equipment storage room, when the alarm started. He felt it before he heard it. A change in the station's hum, a slight flicker in the overhead lights. Then the alarm. Then, from somewhere ahead of him, the sound of something very large moving fast on a hard floor. He ran toward it. The corridor outside the junior tactical training room had 12 cadets in it when the beast came through the open gate. It was not attacking. That was the first thing Darren understood when he turned the corner and saw the scene. The beast was disoriented. Its markings were blazing a red-white that he had never seen before, somewhere between alarm and pain. And it was moving without direction, not charging, but not stopping either. Cadets were scattering. 2 were already on the floor, knocked aside by the beast's shoulder as it turned in the tight space. Someone was shouting for security. Someone else was just shouting. Darren took in all of it in about 2 seconds. Then he walked forward. Not fast, not slow. The same pace he used every morning going into the pen. He moved through the scattered cadets, past the 2 on the floor, into the open space in the center of the corridor. The beast was at the far end, still turning, its bulk filling the width of the passageway. Its head swung toward him. The white in the markings pulsed. Darren stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the corridor the way he stood in the middle of the pen. Hands loose, weight balanced, not braced for impact. He did not reach for the emergency deterrent at his belt. He did not shout. He just stood there, present and still, the way a person stands when they're the calmest thing in a room. The beast looked at him. 3 seconds passed. They felt much longer. Then the red-white began to change. Not all at once. At the edges first, the borders of each marking softening from white to deep red, then red to orange, then a slow, spreading amber. The beast's head turned more fully toward Darren. Its legs stopped moving. The low sound it had been making, a vibration more felt than heard, dropped in pitch. Darren began walking again, slowly toward it. The amber reached the center of every marking on the beast's body in the time it took him to cross the corridor. When he stopped, he was close enough to feel the heat of it, the same warmth he felt in the pen, heavy and real. The beast's massive head was moving toward him. Not aggressively, not a test, just coming down, dropping in a slow arc until the broad armored skull nearly touched the corridor floor, full, all the way down. Darren placed his hand on the side of its jaw. His fingers were very small against the plated scale. He did not say anything. He did not need to. That was where the security team found them. 6 armored personnel, emergency deterrents drawn, came around the corridor corner and stopped. They stood in a tight group and stared at the picture in front of them. The most dangerous creature in the academy, lying still on the floor, head down, markings glowing gold, and a human cadet with one hand resting quietly on its face. And no one on the security team moved for a long time. Commander Rel arrived 4 minutes later. He was told what had happened before he turned the corner, but the telling did not fully prepare him for the seeing. He stood at the edge of the corridor and looked at Darren and the beast for a long moment without speaking. His face gave away almost nothing. Almost. Then he turned to the lieutenant beside him and said, very quietly, "Pull every record we have on human history with animals. Domestication. Interspecies cooperation. Everything. Go back as far as the archive allows." The lieutenant blinked. "Sir, we have been evaluating human cadets against metrics we designed for ourselves." Rel looked back at Darren. The beast had not moved. Its markings were still gold. "I want to understand what we built those metrics to measure, and what we have been leaving out." The lieutenant went to make the request. Rel stayed in the corridor for a while longer. The security team stood down. Darren stayed where he was, not because anyone told him to, but because the beast had not lifted its head yet, and leaving felt like the wrong thing to do. When it finally raised its head, slowly, it looked at Darren with both eyes. Then it stood, turned, and walked calmly back down the corridor toward Block 7, as if it knew exactly where it was going, and IT probably did. Darren watched it go. Then he looked down at his hand, the one that had rested on its jaw, and noticed it was no longer shaking that he hadn't noticed when it stopped. 6 weeks after the corridor incident, the Academy held its quarterly review to IT was a formal session. All senior staff seated in the review chamber, performance data projected on the central display. Each training program presented in order. Most of it was routine. Block 2 numbers were up. Block 5 had a new record in long-range tactical simulation. The medical bay reported a quiet cycle. Then Rel stood to present Block 7 that he was not a dramatic speaker. He never had been. He laid out the data the same way he did everything, clearly, without decoration, letting the numbers carry whatever weight they had. 11 sessions, 60-second holds every single time, 0 medical incidents. And then the corridor event, which he described in plain language. A containment failure, 91 seconds of open access, a creature that had sent cadets to medical bay 14 times in one cycle, and a human who had walked toward it unarmed and brought it down from red-white to gold in under 10 seconds. The chamber was quiet when he finished. Then one of the senior Drathian instructors asked the obvious question. What technique had the human used? Rel said, "No technique. Not in any sense the Academy currently taught." There was a long pause. The instructor asked him to clarify. Rel said, "We have spent 200 years training cadets to dominate the Vorkai, to outlast it, outmaneuver it, prove force against force until it accepted them. No cadet has ever succeeded. In 11 days, Cadet Holt did not attempt any of that. He was present. He was calm. He did not pretend he was unafraid. The beast would have read that immediately. He simply carried his fear without letting it control the space between them." He paused. "I believe the Vorkai recognized that. I believe it has been waiting for 40 years to recognize that." Another pause. The Velhari data analyst in the second row said carefully, "Are you suggesting that human cadets possess some innate advantage in this specific area?" "I am suggesting," Rel said, "that we have been testing humans on metrics we designed for Sorth endurance, Drathian aggression tolerance, and Velhari precision. Humans perform adequately on all 3. They do not perform exceptionally on any of them." He looked around the room. "What we have not been measuring is what they actually are." He brought up the last section of his report. Historical data pulled from the archives, 10,000 years of humans and animals. Horses carrying humans into battle. Dogs working alongside soldiers in the dark. Creatures that could kill a human without effort, choosing not to because something had been built patiently over time on terms the animal recognized as honest. He did not explain it further. The room was quiet for the rest of the session. That same afternoon, Cinna found Darren in the pen. He was sitting against the beast's side, reading a tactical manual, one arm resting casually on its foreleg like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. The beast's markings were a slow, deep gold. It was doing nothing. It was simply there, and so was he. Cinna sat near the pen entrance and watched for a while before she spoke. "Rel's report went to the Coalition Review Board today," she said. "There is talk about revising the Human Cadet Evaluation Framework." Darren turned a page. "That seems like a lot of work for a lot of people." "Yes." She looked at the beast. It opened one large eye and looked back at her, then closed it again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you know from the beginning That it would go this way? Darren thought about it for a moment. No, I had no idea. I just knew that the way everyone else was doing it wasn't working, and doing it the same way again wasn't going to help. That's it, Cinna said. That was the whole reasoning, more or less. Cinna was quiet. That is the most frightening thing I have ever heard from someone in a military program. Darren smiled slightly. It worked out. This time, she said. Has to work once before it becomes a strategy, he said. She looked at him for a long moment, then took out her data pad and added 2 more lines to her file. She did not tell him what they said. 3 days later, the new intake of cadets arrived on Station Kelvith. 87 of them, fresh from their home worlds, carrying their bags and their expectations. Several of them had already heard stories. The stations passed news the way all closed communities did, efficiently and slightly wrong in the details that a group of them gathered at the observation window of Block 7 before dinner. They pressed close to the glass and peered down into the pen, expecting something dramatic. A display of dominance. Maybe. A battle. Something worth the stories. What they saw was a human sitting quietly against the side of the most dangerous creature in the academy. One hand resting on its jaw. Both of them completely still in the amber gold light of the pen. Like they had always been there and would be there long after everything else changed. A new cadet near the back of the group whispered, "What is he doing?" An older cadet beside her answered without looking away from the window, "We are not entirely sure. Nobody is, but that is the human. And that creature has not been gold since before any of us were born." The new cadet looked at the window for a long time. "Are there more of them?" she asked quietly. "More humans?" The older cadet finally turned to look at her. "Yes," she said. "There are quite a lot of them, actually." She let that sit for a moment. "We are very glad they are on our side.